Business leaders know the future is already here. The economy is shifting. Non-humans are entering the workforce. Nothing feels certain. SHRM understands those evolving challenges, both in the workplace and the wider world. In this podcast, we'll bring together authors, researchers, executives, and non-traditional experts to help you take on the challenges others haven't yet considered. Because you don't need to be a futurist, you need actionable insights now. You need to be a Tomorrowist. Today, we're unpacking some of the most significant workplace shifts and what they mean for HR leaders and organizations in the year ahead. The past year has delivered some real curveballs, from rapid changes in inclusion and diversity policies to the evolving role of AI in employee engagement. And 2026 will only see the pace of change accelerate. Joining me to take a closer look at SHRM's predictions for what 2026 has in store is James Atkinson, Vice President of Thought Leadership at SHRM. James, welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me today.
I'm excited for this conversation, James, and we certainly have a lot to talk about. Before we dive in, a quick note for the audience. The full report behind today's discussion is a SHRM member-only exclusive. We'll highlight key points here, but you'll want to check out the full interactive experience at shrm.org/2026 trends to explore all 7 predictions in depth. Now, let's get started. Let's start at the beginning, James. What is the project, and what is SHRM aiming to accomplish with these trends and predictions?
Absolutely. Well, this is our 2026 HR Trends project. And as a part of that, we have identified 7 key trends for 2026 to watch. The project's based on the research that we've been conducting across the year and the trends that we're seeing across the broader HR and workplace landscape. It really digs a lot into our CEO priorities and perspectives research as well, which looks at the big priorities and challenges and future trends that CEOs have shared with us. So we capture all of those priorities and the research that we've done, and we've uncovered these trends really with the goal of providing very tactical strategies for HR leaders to drive business impact and stay ahead.
That's awesome. Let's start with the first prediction. We want to make time for all 7. And so we'll start with the buzzword of 2025, which has been AI. So here's the first prediction. AI hasn't lived up to the hype, but companies aren't giving up. Can you walk us through what this trend means and why 2026 is a turning point?
Absolutely. Look, there's been a lot of promises that have been made about what AI can do to really solve all of the organizational problems out there, right? So, AI is going to help drive efficiencies, reduce costs, improve profitability, drive revenue. And there are AI solutions that can help in all of those areas. But the reality is that a lot of organizations simply haven't seen the results that maybe they were promised or they were expecting. And so that is where we are right now. And in fact, 1 in 6 HR professionals tell us that when it comes to AI implementation, only that 1 in 6 tell us that they've really seen something that's been somewhat successful. And of course, we've seen headlines of many pilots and projects that are just really not living up to all of this hype. However, people are still very invested in wanting to make AI deliver on those promises. In fact, with our own research, CEOs told us that this was their top priority for 2026, adopting AI at their organizations. Now, on the flip side, they also told us that the biggest challenge they're facing is technological advancements such as AI. So it's a two-sided priority, but challenge that they're facing as well. So they're not giving up. It's still a big desire is to capture those results and the promises that have been laid out.
Yeah, I think a word that goes alongside AI is FOMO, right? I think many leaders are juggling. We don't want to miss the AI bandwagon because of all the benefits that some are predicting or some have even experienced. And yet, for many industries and many organizations, how to implement it, which companies and service providers to partner with, because everybody's promising the world, and not wanting to not seem innovative to whether it's your investors or your clients. I would imagine that many executives are really in tough conversations on, if we don't do anything, what is the risk there, and what if we decide on the wrong partner or the wrong product, what is that? And so I agree with you. It hasn't quite lived up to the hype, but I think in the 24/7 news cycles that we live in, things seem a lot faster than they actually are. And so hopefully 2026, most of our audience can find products that work for them, test it, and begin to share with others what works. Let's move on to the second one, which has also been, very top of mind for many, particularly in our HR world. And that is that second prediction is that inclusion and diversity is about performance, not causes. Reframes I&D as a performance driver rather than a values conversation. And what does this shift signal about how organizations will approach inclusion in the new year?
Yeah, we've certainly seen a lot of shifts in inclusion and diversity across 2025 as a result of changes in federal policies and really pressures to deliver financial impact. What I'll say, though, is that even amidst all of these challenges for inclusion and diversity across the year, we found that 3 in 10 organizations have actually increased their spend on I&D initiatives across the year, and really only 6% have decreased that spend. So there is still a desire to focus on inclusion and diversity at many organizations. But the shift that is happening is moving more towards trying to understand exactly how I&D initiatives are going to impact the bottom line. Now, there's a lot of research out there to suggest that more inclusive and more diverse organizations perform better. But what individual organizations are doing is trying to figure out how do they actually tie in each of those initiatives to key outcomes, whether it's employee engagement, performance management, or overall performance, retention, even driving revenue. All of these things are ways in which organizations are saying, hey, we want to show that at our organization what those outcomes are.
The third prediction, it says that workforce fragmentation will peak as companies lean into micro teams, freelancers, and even AI agents. At a high level, what does this evolution mean for how organizations are structured?
Sure. So we have seen this process of workforce fragmentation happening across the last several years in particular. And we think about this as being workforce fragmentation as really being kind of different types of workers in different locations, different responsibilities. And the shifts themselves have really come in 3 big areas. One is kind of the who of that workforce. And so we're seeing a rise in more independent contractors, gig workers, kind of more flexibility in the workforce in terms of those types of workers. And we see that trend is expected to increase moving forward. We also see a big change in the where of the workforce. Certainly, there's been a rise across the last 5-6 years of remote and hybrid work. And even though there's been a big push to bring people back into the office, we still see more than 1 in 5 people regularly working remotely or in a hybrid environment across the country. And these are the types of things that people are expecting. And then you mentioned AI agents, right? That's kind of the what. Some might say the who, depending on how you define an AI agent. But really, organizations are experimenting with bringing in AI agents to take over, even up to complex tasks. And once you bring all of these things together, we're really in a situation where we're expecting this fragmentation to increase. And it's really creating more of a structural shift in how work is resourced, moving away from some of these stable and long-term roles to a more modular, adaptive workforce strategy.
The future of work is shaped by the talent you hire today. Join us in Dallas, Texas, April 19th until the 22nd to gain the tools and strategies to build a stronger, more resilient workforce at SHRM Talent 2026. Learn more at shrm.org/talent26-podcast.
And I think, none of these 7 predictions are in their silos and they're not mutually exclusive, right? And so we started off at the top, AI hasn't lived up to the hype. And I think, we have quickly evolved our conversation on AI even in terms of how can it help me do my tasks faster. And we've all used AI in virtual calls to summarize things, to summarize emails, or to edit things. And now we've evolved into, can AI agents either, supplement, complement, or even replace, some of the menial tasks? Obviously, it comes with, a lot of risks there in terms of even proprietary information or processes, or even some things that many people have experienced, which is AI hallucination, just makes stuff up and says everything's a good idea. It's a very accommodating, again, thing or person, depending on how you view your GPT from time to time. But speaking of that, and sort of the humanization of what AI can do in terms of, opinions and subjective thought in the workplace, the 4th prediction that we're putting out there is that AI coaches will be the death of annual performance reviews. What does that mean? And what does this shift tell us about how future of performance management affect in 2026 and beyond?
Sure. Well, let's start with where performance management is today. And in many places, it's actually not working very well. It's a once a year, slightly awkward conversation where you review what's been happening, for a particular employee. But, HR professionals are telling us 6 in 10 say that half of their managers aren't really able to address underperformance in their employees. And 4 in 10 tell us that their managers aren't capable of really providing constructive feedback. Of course, it's not fair to just blame managers. HR professionals say, hey, we're not providing enough training to do this well. We're not equipping managers with the data they need to have these types of conversations. This is where an AI coaching tool can come into play. It's really about kind of transforming these static reviews into a more dynamic, ongoing, continuous feedback cycle. It's equipping managers with data that they need and insights about how their employees are performing. And it really has the opportunity to kind of change that dynamic of coaching and feedback for managers.
I think we've all, have seen some stuff on the internet where the manager will write out an email or a performance review and accidentally leave that last tag, right? When the GPT asks, do you want me to ask this in a different format? And so we that's the comical side of it, right? But I think that the concerning side, as a prediction, is, inclusive of this, is how does this impact people's performances, their promotions, and even sometimes their livelihood when, organizations sometimes don't have that check, right? And I think it goes both ways, I think, right? And I think, for some, it certainly does help manage a large task. If you're a manager with lots of, independent contributors that you have to manage, it certainly helps. But, it'll be interesting to see. And I think, again, AI will get, as they often say, today is the worst that AI will ever be. And so as particularly AI that's task specific gets better, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out in the next year. We're about the halfway point of our 7. The 5th prediction, employees work harder, smarter, and collect 2 paychecks. We saw this conversation happen again in the pandemic, but this highlights the normalization of side hustles and polywork. How do you see moonlighting reshaping the employer-employee relationships in 2026? And I think many of our audience may have heard about this one person who made the news, had 20 some odd jobs. And once one found out, then the other 25 found out, and it became a mess. But the fact that even somebody can get to that point, right, speaks to, it is a byproduct or an effect of remote work. It is, how AI agents and even other AI tools can mimic jobs or mimic, showing up to work in the first place. But tell us about the prediction here about the polywork, which is a new phrase that I think many of us are hearing for the first time.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think very few people are holding down 20 jobs, and kudos to that person for figuring out how to manage all of that. It sounds very complicated. But our own research tells us that about 7 in 10 people have had some kind of side hustle, either currently or at some point in their career. That kind of extra little bit that you're making additional money in, maybe you're learning a new skill as a part of that. Again, it's often driven by financial concerns, and the benefits of having that extra income are really why most people do that. As we head into 2026, we do see a bit of a softening labor market. There's some concerns around inflation. We just saw a slight uptick in unemployment this week. So we're actually expecting this trend to continue across the year. Now, for that employer-employee relationship, it raises a couple of issues. First, HR professionals tell us that they are concerned about, potential conflicts of interest between their primary job and, a side hustle. They're concerned about things like time management, or even using the resources of one company on the side hustle itself. So it's important for HR to really set clear policies around this, not just assume it's not happening or that it will work itself out, but having those clear guidelines and guardrails will help to make that better. I think it's also important to understand why people are doing this in the first place. Is it because they're not making enough money in their first job to do that? Is it because they feel like they're not getting the development for their career? Whatever those cases may be, there's an opportunity to really understand those and perhaps improve certain situations, especially for that top talent you want to have, fully focused on your one job.
No, thanks, James. I think you're right, and you bring up a good point. We're talking about these predictions at a high level, and certainly how it impacts large organizations, small organizations, and the leaders. But many of these predictions rise or sit atop some of the deeper root causes of why things are happening. AI certainly didn't happen in a bubble, right? And people picking up side jobs, whether it is to make money or because they don't feel safe in that first job, right? Because there's a lot of insecurity about the labor market as well, which leads naturally into our sixth prediction, which is that recruitment is broken and technology alone can't fix it. And so there's some underlying causes that we have to talk about. At a high level, what's fundamentally failing in the hiring process now, and is there a way out of it?
In a lot of ways, we've leaned on technology to help fix some of the challenges, and it may have created some additional ones along the way, right? And that's probably true in many areas of life. But for recruiting in particular, heads of recruiting tell us that they're expecting a bigger trend in 2026 of applicants using AI to complete their job applications and to craft the perfect resume. At the same time, they're expecting to use AI to improve their own recruiting processes. And so in many places, we're having AI speak to AI as a part of the recruiting process, and we've really lost a bit of that human touch. We've also lost the ability to have real judgment around who might be a really good fit for an organization. 1 in 5 organizations tell us that their AI tools have screened out some highly qualified candidates when they've gone back and taken a look at them. So I think it's key for organizations to really understand where AI is important to leverage in the process, especially efficiencies that will be felt on both sides, both from the recruiter side as well as the candidate side. But it's also important to understand where exactly do we still need to maintain that human touch? Where do we need to have that human interaction in order to evaluate some of the things that might not be evaluated through a keyword search on a resume? And I think in some ways we've gone too far in one direction and need to kind of recalibrate a little bit across the recruiting process.
Yeah, we'll dig deep into this a little bit later in the conversation, but I think everybody knows, we're in this sort of, that Spider-Man visual, right? Like you have the job description is written by AI, and then that's fed through AI by the applicant to come up with the non-AI detectable resume.
Yeah.
And both sides are using AI and the AI detector to try to figure out how they can, ultimately, perhaps the goal needs to be reset, right? Is it to game the system? Is it to save money and time and efficiency? Because obviously you can't, manually sift through the tens of thousands of applicants you might get for a singular position. And so how do you balance that, I think is the ultimate, goal. Final, top of the funnel prediction here before we dig deep into a few of these is that structured training is dead, and points to real-time personalized upskilling that replaces traditional training. So traditional training in terms of you take the day, half a day, you go to a classroom setting, or you're mandated to watch the same video. Tell us a little bit about on-demand upskilling as the change of technology accelerates, as we've mentioned, and how does this redefine learning, and how does this redefinition of learning transform how organizations, both big and small, build capability?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, the pace of change in skills and the skills that we need for our jobs, it just continues to get faster and faster and faster. Just think about the things that you are doing today in your job that you weren't even on your radar 3 years ago, right? And then 3 years before, and 3 months, and so on. And so, unfortunately, the traditional learning models that let's take a day and walk through this curriculum that's been tweaked a couple of times across the last couple of years, that really is not going to help with this rapidly evolving skills landscape. And you bring in AI and how it is really reshaping a lot of how work is getting done day in and day out. And a lot of kind of our traditional approaches are really just not keeping pace. So, half of CHROs tell us they do expect an increased investment in this more rapid skills development. And we have the ability through these technologies to better understand what the skills gaps are, to better understand kind of how all of this comes together from an employee perspective, to really target the development that's needed for that particular role, as well as their aspirations across their career. And so these more on-demand and personalized learning experiences are really changing the nature of L&D at most organizations. And we expect that to only accelerate in the year ahead.
That wraps up our discussion today. As a reminder, SHRM's HR Trends and Predictions for 2026 is a member-only exclusive and is available as an interactive digital experience at shrm.org/2026trends. This isn't your average static report. It's designed to help you explore each trend, dig into the data that we talked about today, and take action for your organization. Thanks again to James Atkinson from SHRM for joining us today. And we'll see you next time. Thank you all for tuning in. Happy holidays and Happy New Year.
Thank you, everyone.
If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe to Tomorrowist wherever you get your podcast. We also publish a weekly newsletter with in-depth articles and the latest SHRM research to help keep you in the know about the trends shaping the future of work. You can subscribe and find all our episodes on our website at shrm.org/Tomorrowist. Thanks for listening. And remember, the workplace is changing rapidly. You don't have to be a futurist. Be a Tomorrowist.